Well, good morning. Hope you're doing well this morning. Sorry, Luke. My name is Mike, and I'm one of the leaders here at Risen City. It's so good to be here with you this morning. If this is your first time at Risen City, maybe it's your first time in church in a while, or maybe ever. I don't know. I pray that you'll feel welcome. I pray to give you a special welcome. You're part of the reason why we do this thing. And so I just want to say, though, to everybody in the room, I hope you are doing okay. I do hope that things are going well because we do take time to pray for you, praying that God works in your life. But we know that sometimes life doesn't always go awesome. Right? We come to church off a bad week and a bad season, a hard time. And I want you to know, if that's how you've been feeling lately, you picked the perfect place to be. We just believe that the church is meant to be a home for the hurting, the broken, the bruised, the confused, the doubting, the questioning, and those who are celebrating and it's going well for, that everyone can come in the grace of Jesus and be led to a place of deepest flourishing and wholeness, which we believe is ultimately found in Him. In fact, I'd say it like this: in all seasons of life, what we believe that we need is actually more Jesus. And so for us, as a church, we are just so thankful that we believe in a God who loves us so much that His grace invites us as we are, but doesn't want to keep us that way. That He wants to bring us to our place of healing and wholeness and life and freedom in Jesus. And so as a church, the way that we say it is this: that we don't really want to be about creating a religious moment. Not that we, don't have religion in our service. We are a religion. Obviously, we believe in Jesus. But what we want to create is not just this time where you come and you receive some stuff and you go home and nothing's different and you just check it off the box, say, I went to church, God must be happy. We are about creating a moment where we believe heaven and earth collide, that the divine and humanity get to meet for a second. We can truly encounter Jesus, that we saw in the Bible, if you read it, that every time He encounters someone, something happens, significant, life changes. And we just want to create a space for that to happen here in Kitchener in 2018 in the Apollo Cinema, that something amazing can happen when Jesus walks into the room, and we just believe that He is here, which is amazing for us. And so the way that we articulate that is we exist as a church to lead people into a soul-changing relationship with Jesus. That we just want to be all about that, leading people to that space. And one of the ways that we do that here is through what we call the Bible. As Christians, we do believe in this Bible. It's not just some old, antiquated relic kind of book for us. We believe it's a living word from our good Father. And this is what we have to understand today, that we believe that Jesus, that God loves us so much, that He would actually give us His word for our good. That as Christians, when we approach the Bible, we believe that all that it teaches us, all that it gives us is for our joy, for the greater flourishing of our life and soul. That our God sometimes says no to us so that we can have more joy in the end. That He's given this word to encourage us, to challenge us, to change us. And today we're going to open it up a little bit and in kind of a different context. If this is your first time here at Risen City, then today will not be normal for you. It's not going to be the normal sort of sermon and things that I usually do because we are at the end of a series called Cultivate. And it's been a series that essentially focuses around a very simple point but powerful one. That Jesus said, out of the heart the mouth speaks. That you will live out of the condition of your soul. And so the question really has been, how's your soul doing? What's that like? Because the issues on the inside will leak out into everything else. And so although we've been focusing in on marriage and relationships and parenting and things like that, the underlying question is this: that what we need to get to is that if we want to create health in our marriages, in our homes, in our families, we need to create some health in here. And Jesus says that He is the way, the truth, and the life. And to ultimately get health is to live a life that looks more and more like Him. That doing what Jesus would do if He were me in my situation. So that's what we've been about. And we want to end today in a kind of Q&A kind of session here, where normally I'm very sort of, what's the right word? That's not like, I move a lot and I yell and I get quite into it. I'm animated, but I want to try to be a little bit more subdued today and answer some of the questions, because I asked people to submit some questions over the last few weeks, and we have a bunch that have come in, and I want to answer them well and sort of have a coffee shop kind of moment. We're just all having coffee and we're talking about life, but it's still Mike, so I still might start yelling at you a little bit. But if I do that, it's out of a good heart for you. And so we're going to talk about everything. Today's going to be an interesting day because we are talking about everything from spiritual disciplines and Christian meditation, things like that, all the way to parenting and dating and porn. And there's a bunch of stuff that came in. It's going to be a fun day. So are you ready? Are you ready? Amen. All right, so the first two questions I'm going to put up together, actually, because they sort of go together, and it's these. It was this. what is the point of fasting? And does fasting things other than food really count? Great question. And the second one is, what is the Christian way to meditate? And the reason why I'm bringing these together is because they are together sort of in the idea of spiritual disciplines, and they really are connected to the greater conversation around what prayer is for us as Christians, because both of these reflect a kind of prayerful activity. And so for us as Christians, we believe that when we pray, right, we are doing at least two things. At least two is that we are in relationship and we are realigning ourselves. That we are getting to know God. That we don't believe as Christians, and this is key, that we understand, that God is some impersonal, cosmic, transcendent force of the universe, that God is in all things and God is everywhere. Well, He is everywhere, but not in all things. I don't know why I said that. But here's the thing. We believe that He is this immanent person to be known, to be in a relationship with, to have a friendship, in a sense, with, to bring my concerns and my cares. But He's also not just our Father and friend, He is our Lord and King. And so we come to realign ourselves with His will, with His ways, with His desires. And so in prayer, we are encountering a real person, right, and trying to figure out who He is and what He wants and living our life in light of that. And so fasting is a kind of practice that helps us align ourselves with Him. Ultimately, it's a practice that we see in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in the teaching of Jesus, in the church history. And if you don't know what fasting is, let me just give you a quick thing. It is basically the general definition of fasting for most people outside of even the Christian faith is that you don't eat for a time, right? But for Christians, it's not just you don't eat. It's a refocusing of the appetite. I don't do something in one direction so I can focus my attention in another one. Usually food, but it's saying that I'm going to restrict one appetite to truly focus on the one thing that my soul really needs. And that would, in this case, would be Jesus. So it's taking a dedicated time of restriction of one thing to pray. That's why food usually goes really well. It's because, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but if you don't eat for a while, your stomach hurts, right? Like, I don't know if you've experienced that before, right? I do that all the time. My wife says I eat constantly. Maybe it's because I don't like this feeling of an empty stomach. I don't know what it is. Regardless, right? That's why it's actually good, because the pain of hunger reminds me that I should pain after God like that. So I purposely restrict something to focus my attention deliberately to seek God and to pray. Now the question really gets down to, can I fast other things than food? And hear me today. I'm not going to say that you can't, right? There are opportunities, but you have to make sure, and this is what we need to understand, is that it's got to be something that's actually measurable and actually like worthwhile. Like, you can't go to your wife and say, I'm fasting time with my in-laws. That doesn't work, right? Or you can't be like the guy that's, I'm going to fast chocolate for a while. That's not a fast. That's just called a good decision, right? Not totally, but you know what I'm saying? Right? And so, because it's got to be something that I actually can take time away from to go and pursue Jesus. And so, yes, could you fast your phone? You probably should in general. Technology fast is a good idea. But the question becomes this. If you say, I'm fasting social media, are you actually going to go and pray? Because just to say I'm not going to go on it and then to not take the time to pray is not a fast. That's just a good idea. That's what that is, right? Maybe some of us in the room, can I challenge us, probably should fast some Netflix. Can we be real? Right? Take the same amount of time you're on Netflix and praying. You would probably know Jesus a whole lot more. Right? Like, let's just call it what it is. And so maybe there is some opportunity to fast other things than food, because we can actually, it might even pain us. Some of us are literally addicted to our technology. Can we call that as it is? So it might actually hurt as much as not eating, potentially, right? But the point is, I restrict one thing and fill that same space with the pursuit of God in another direction. So can you fast other things than food? Of course you can. Just don't be, ridiculous in it. Right? Do something that actually matters, something that's actually going to cost you something that's actually going to be difficult, and give that space to God. So that's why I would suggest food, but maybe you have some medical issues or other things that you can't actually do that. Then, hey, fast your phone, fast your favorite television show for a while, fast something that makes you put that time away for Jesus. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? And the next one, this meditation question, is actually a good one, because for some people, when you hear Christian meditation, you might think that that's like not a real thing, right? Because usually when we think about meditation, we're connected to some idea around sort of Eastern religion and philosophy and modern spirituality and things like that. And it's true, right? There are some meditative practices that do exist. But in Scripture, in fact, David says in the Psalms all the time he's going to meditate. In fact, Psalm chapter 1, the first chapter, he says, I'm going to meditate. But this is the thing. It's meditating on something. There's a specific direction of his attention, and it's always on the truth in the Word of God. Because in other practices of meditation, right, whether it is a religious kind of meditation, more of a spiritual kind of transcendental meditation, even some sort of yogic meditation, right, these things at their core, right, often are connected to some idea of detachment, of I want to sort of loose myself to the universe. I want to get beyond the self. I want to silence the self. I want to empty myself. I want to detach myself from my suffering or whatever it might be. And although, hear me today, the breathing practices and the actual physical movements are actually pretty good for you. Like, I have to stretch because I got some weird hip problems. And I found out later that all the stretches I do are like these like weird meditation positions. And I was like, I don't care. It helps my hips, so I'm going to do it, right? So it's not a problem, but the thing is, where's your mind at? That's the difference between a Christian meditation position in a place than sort of an Eastern religion one, because for us, it's not about transcending myself. It's not about emptying myself or centering myself in the cosmic universe. We don't believe any of that actually is. What we believe is that there's a God who's personal, and that when we focus in on the truth revealed in His Word, we actually get to know Him and encounter Him. And there's actually a crazy thing that begins to happen, that you actually can experience the God of the universe in these moments. Like, here's the thing. If you're someone who does meditate and you have that practice, maybe you aren't a Christian, I would challenge you in this. There's actually more to that meditative place than you even know right now. That there's a deeper thing there, that if you are willing to enter the space in that kind of spiritual world, there is an opportunity if you would ask Jesus to show up and speak and be part of what you're doing. He will. He's faithful. I want you to know that. But for the Christian, what we tend to focus our minds on is the Scripture. So if you were at Heart and Soul a few weeks ago, we actually did this with Psalm 23, where I put it on the screen, and we just read Psalm 23 and mulled it over and meditated literally upon the Word of God. So if you want to sit there and do the stereotypical cross your legs, breathe, and whatever, fine, do that. Fill your mind with Jesus. Right? Because for us, it's not about the mantras and the things like that. It's simply about putting my mind to rest on Him, being silent with Him. We talk about the practice of silence and solitude, where we just sit quietly and wait on the Lord, thinking on the things of God. That's part of spiritual disciplines. And so can Christians meditate? Of course you should be. The Bible says to. Right? The question is, what are you focusing your mind on? Well, what are you filling your mind with? For us, it's the truth of God, because there's so much more to experience of God than what we often know. And actually, it's a great invitation that we can encounter this Jesus more than we've ever thought before. You know what I'm saying? All right. Hopefully that clears that up a little bit. We're going to move on to some dating questions. All my single people and people with kids who one day will have to give advice, right? We all got to be understanding about this. Here's the question. I think it's up there. There it is. As someone in the dating stage, how much responsibility do I have in cultivating the soul of my partner? That's a good question, right? It's a question about responsibility, right? And here's the thing. I don't care if you're dating at all or not, right? If there are people in your sort of relational sphere of influence, you should be wanting to cultivate their soul. Just as a general Christian practice, if I'm getting to know Jesus and I'm getting healthy, I want other people to know what I got, right? So I should be wanting people to be cultivating in their soul. But when it comes to dating, I want to make sure we understand this. It sort of depends on the nature and stage of the relationship. Because hear me today, if you're sort of new into the dating world, right, and you're maybe really young, like you're 14, you don't know nothing yet. You should not be cultivating anybody. But here's the thing, right? Or even if you're a little bit older, right, and you sort of been dating and you're getting to know this person, right, at the beginning of a relationship, there must be, hear me today, some relational boundaries and emotional boundaries that get set up, that only get destroyed or put down with time and with trust. Because hear me today, the kind of cultivation that we've been speaking about is not, sending encouraging text messages with Bible verses and emojis in it, right? That's cute and it works and you need that. We're talking about entering the mess of someone's soul, right? And hear me today, this kind of cultivation is scary without the covenant to protect it. Because that's what we have to understand too. When we talk about cultivation, this is entering into the sins, the wounds, the struggles, the wrestles, the pains of someone's soul. And some of that stuff is quite shameful, we feel. Right? And even when you're married, can we be real married people? You still hide some stuff from your spouse. Right? And that's with the covenant that says, I'm going to be your partner to the very end. I'm going to die with your secrets kept in my soul. Like I'm for you. And even then, we still have a hard time releasing all of our vulnerability to them. And so outside of the covenant that protects that, it's scary to be the kind of vulnerable that we need to be to cultivate each other if we don't have that covenant to protect it. And so there is a wisdom, single people, you need to have, because you should not be sharing everything with the people that you are dating. Now, I would say this, the natural progression of the relationship is the closer you get to marriage, the more you should be cultivating each other's soul. Right? Because we're assuming that intimacy goes up, love is going up, and as you love someone, you hopefully want to see them get healthy and get involved in that. And so the closer you get to marriage, the more the responsibility naturally begins to grow. But we still have to have this wisdom here that really begins to understand this simple thing, right? That dating is messy. And so the line for your relationship, I don't know where it is, right? When do you sort of jump into that? You got to figure that stuff out. But at least this, if marriage is not on the conversation, then you're not the primary cultivator of their soul. Their connect group should be accountability partners, mentors, right? Parents, things like that. If you are not in the space where I'm ready to commit my life to you forever, then you sort of want to hold some of that back, right? And that's not being dishonest. It's being wise, okay? And so just making sure that, but the moment you say, hey, babe, we want to get married, we should be pursuing this, that's when conversations need to begin to shift. Hey, here's some parts of me that I've never let you see before. Can we have a conversation around it? Can we move forward on this? And so just being aware of that. So how much responsibility? It sort of depends, right, on whether or not you understand that you're going to be married or not. Which leads us to a very awesome question. I like this question. It's going to be a fun one. How much patience and understanding do I need to have with someone that I'm not married to? And as a father, I love this question because I have a little girl. And one day, she's going to start wanting to date people. And so in about 30 years, when I give her my advice, I'm going to make sure that I speak the same thing I'm saying today. And because this question really hit me as a dad, right? That if I'm going to into Weston too, obviously, but Liv is going to be dating first, and she's a cute little girl, and I want to make sure that any guy that comes around is worthy. And so this is the question that I'm thinking through is really what this means to me is this. And I'm gonna say it in Mike language. So this was not how the person probably meant it, but this is how I read it. Is how long do I put up with? I guess I don't need to finish. Y'all get what I'm saying? Undealt with, unchanging patterns of sin and stupidity. That's what I'm going to call it, right? How long do I got to put up with that kind of stuff? And here it is, right? It all depends, in my mind at least, and I think from Scripture as well, right, on the depth and seriousness of what you're dealing with. Because you need to be able to distinguish between whether this is an immaturity issue or a character issue. Because those are very different. And if it's make or break in the relationship. So, for example, if you've been waiting 10 years to try to get someone in your life to love watching basketball with you and be there and enjoy those moments, right? Then you might have to have way more patience because it's not a make or break and it's not going to happen because I literally have been waiting 10 years for that. And I'm not putting pressure out there to anybody in the room at all. But it's one of those things where it's not going to happen. So I have a lot more patience with that even when we were dating. But Paul says, we referenced this a few weeks ago, that as Christians, right, we are not to be unequally yoked in our relationships. And when we apply that directly to marriage and relationships, what that means for us as Christians is that we are called, right, to pursue marriage with people who have the same faith as us. Not to be judgmentally exclusive, but to say that we want to love the same things ultimately. That we actually want the best for our relationship. And if we are worshiping two different gods and going in two different directions, we will be inevitably adding more tension to an already difficult relationship. And so we want to be about the same thing, moving in the same direction, wanting to honor, worship, and cultivate the same kind of life in us together. So that means this. At one level, if you are waiting for someone to come to faith, stop waiting. Because it just puts you in a weird space. It puts them in a weird space because then you never really know if they came to Jesus just to keep you as a relationship or whether they meant it. Right? We used to call it missionary dating. It's a dumb idea and don't do it. And I don't care if you can tell me all the reasons why yours is a situation that's different. It's not. You're not that wise. And so just get over it. And maybe if you love them, let them go. Right? It's classic. It's good advice because maybe they'll find Jesus and come back and that'd be good. Now, beyond that, here's the next thing. If there's a character issue, this is where we need to talk. Because Because if we're together and we love Jesus and it's great, but then there's some characters where we talked about having a standard, right? And trying to make sure that we are moving towards a direction of health and wholeness, then you need to, number one, have a lot of people looking into your relationship, because I don't care how wise you think you are, love is blind. Right? And infatuation makes people look way better to you than what they actually are. And you need some healthy eyes looking into your relationship to see the red flags that you will inevitably not see in the state of romantic and infatuated dating, which is cute and wonderful and full of life and bubbles and whatever. But you need to see the reality of these people. And so what that means first is getting people to look in. That's the first bit of advice. Second is this. You need to look at the pattern of their life. Not individual moments. Everyone messes things up. What is the pattern of their life and their approach to when things go wrong? If they have a pattern of bad character, run for your life. Because you're not married to them yet, and they probably got issues that you aren't qualified to fix, right? So you better just go and move on. Because here's the thing, like, if some guy comes and tries to date Liv, that's how I'm going to use it, because that's so real to me, right? And he can't hold down a job for more than like a few weeks, and he always blames it's the boss, it's the company, it's this, whatever. Maybe the first 2 times, okay. But if it's a consistent pattern, he's lazy, hardworking, and can't deal with adversity. And I hope she doesn't marry that guy, and I'll tell her to get rid of him. Right? And if Wes comes home and he's got a girl that is always, on him for not texting him back right away or something like that, or always drama with their friends and she's always in the middle of everything, I will gladly tell my son, you need to dump her right now, because the drama's not going to stop. She's going to bring it into your marriage and it's not going to go well. Right? If there's a pattern of constant behavior, right, that's a character issue, not immaturity, because some of us are just dumb and immature, and in time we will grow up, right? Then we have to realize that it's not my job. It's not my job to partner with you to the place of your growth if I'm not married to you yet. And I'm not going to put myself in a place to marry someone that is going to actually be worse for me, because right now I'm infatuated with you. Right? And then especially when there's some major red flags in the space, right? Like if they got massive debt issues before marriage, that's not going to stop when they get married. Right? Now, maybe they need to learn how to use a budget, sure, but if they do that, they can't handle their money, don't marry that guy. It's not going to go well, right? If he has issues with anger, right, and he's intimidating and he gets aggressive with you when you're dating, right, when he's on his best behavior, he is going to be an idiot when you get married and no one's watching. Don't marry that guy. Run from him. If he's having his head full of pornography he's going to deal with in a moment, don't marry that guy. Right? If there are situations where where the people are involved, if it's the girl as well, I know I'm hitting on the guys right now, but say there's issues of excessive drinking, of maybe some cheating that goes on, maybe there's some lying that is always seeming to happen. If there's some major character flaws, it is not your job to refine them. They are not your spouse. And don't ask you to have a harder marriage than marriage already is by trying to date someone and try to save them and help them and get them. But that is not on you. And so if there are major red flags, literally run for your life. Run for the life of your kids. Run for the life of your future. Especially ladies, can I talk to you for a second? Because you put up with a lot of dumb stuff that you shouldn't. But because for whatever insecure reason, you're like, well, I got to find somebody. If you have to always defend your choice to your friends, you probably made a bad choice. And he is not some diamond in the rough that you're going to fix and polish up. Right? If he wanted to be worthy of marriage, he would make himself that way. So you can't let him, right, get off the hook with all this dumb stuff, right? And so for us, the question really is this. Technically, the answer, to the question is you don't have to have any patience. Problem is, if you go that way, you'll never have a relationship either, because, we're all messed up and we need our help. But if there's some major issues, right, and you're not married to them, it's not your job to fix them. It's not your job. Now, if you are married, remember what we talked about. You are partners in their progress, and you've got to be committed to see them through all the crap that is in their soul. Right? And hopefully you're doing that together. Right? Now, I want to make sure we understand where we're going to go next, because I'm going to give you a content warning a little bit, because let's just say it's going to get awkward. For some people. Maybe not for everyone. Go ahead. Here's the question. What about this thing called porn? Before marriage, after marriage, and then connected to that was a question around masturbation. So I don't know if you ever talked about masturbation in church before. Welcome to Prison City. We're going to talk about it. So first off, and I want to make sure I understand this too, that the next question we're going to answer is about dating, but it's connected to this one. So I wanted to put this one first and make it all sort of work together because we have to get to the understanding of the reasons why Christians would answer the questions in some of the ways that we are going to answer them today. And so for us as a Christian, okay, the answer to pornography in any stage of your life is a very simple one. And maybe you can guess it. It's no. That's just the answer, right? I could just put the period right there and walk out and we'd be done. Because that is. But I want to make sure we understand why. I want to make sure that we get something different. So I want to review quickly what we spoke about when we talked about human sexuality in the Christian context a few weeks ago, if you were here, right? In the worldview of Jesus, we as Christians view sex as something that is not just good, but sacred. Sacred. That it's an act that God initiated before sin broke down the world, that like life itself, like worship, like our work, right? Sex and marriage is sacred for us, that we view it as something beautiful, a gift given by God for the flourishing of a marriage, for the reminding of the covenant. And what we said was that in our mind, sex becomes primarily, right, the avenue, the physical avenue by which I remind my spouse, I am yours. That sex in its inherent nature is actually selfless, not about me. And three things come from it, if you remember. Unity, babies, obviously, and pleasure, right? And pleasure is a part of it. But those are umbrellaed under this idea of unity, that sex we see as a ceremonial sort of marriage day all over again. That we are committing again to say, I am for you, you are for me, I am with you. We are unified, though we are unique. We are two becoming one. This is, as I said that week, if you remember, some soul weaving. Right? It's person mingling. It's some depths of what's happening. It's deeper than just this physical embodiment of pleasure. And so given that context, if sexuality is meant to be strengthening the marriage between a spouse, that they get reminded of we are one together forever. That's what this really is about. Then obviously in that context, pornography is a perversion of that. Right? Like, I don't think that would be a huge jump for us to make logically, but the reason we have to understand this is because if that is true of sex, then all that comes with sex, right? The nakedness of body, soul, sexual acts, the fantasies of our mind, all that gets directed simply towards my covenant partner, my spouse, exclusively to the day that I die, that she becomes my standard of beauty, that she becomes my standard of sexuality, that she is everything that I want, need, and desire, and then to desire outside of that takes sexuality outside of its blessed place. And so for us, when we come to pornography, right, we have to understand that what it does is it simply makes sexuality its most base thing. Simply pleasure. And totally selfish. Right? Totally selfish. Because it's not about anyone but you in that moment. But it's about nothing. It's in the woman that you are looking at in that moment is nothing more to you than an object. And this is what we need to see today, because yes, is it true that in the Bible, Jesus says to look lustfully upon a woman is to commit adultery in your heart? He does say that. So just on that level alone, if I'm going to lust after someone that is not my wife, right, because having a certain attraction to your wife is important, right, but if it's going to be directed at someone who's not my wife, I'm breaking covenant with there, and there's a sin in that, right, and so whether you're married or single, if the person you're lusting after is not your wife, guess what? Wrong, sinful, but beyond that, hear me today, beyond the practical implication of porn on your life, on the world, is crazy. Think, if you're someone who cares about social justice, right, the consumption of porn is directly linked to sex trafficking and abuse of women. So if you want to be a really good feminist, you better hate porn. It's not liberating and freeing. It's actually directly linked to the supply and demand of human trafficking. Right? So if I care about that, I'm going to be disgusted by that. It doesn't matter if I can justify in my head that woman wanted to be on screen. It doesn't matter. If I consume it, I'm participating in the sexual trafficking of girls around the world. Right? And then beyond that, it makes a human being nothing more to me than a sexual toy. Because what this happens is I'm sitting by myself and wherever I am, and I'm consuming, right, the sexuality of another being without the care in the world for who she is, where she's going, her emotional state. Simply, and this is what's crazy. This is what we have to begin to see. I am literally saying that this person exists as the object of my pleasure, nothing more. I'll turn it off and never think about it again. Because all you are to me as a human being right now is my masturbation example. It's what you are. And I don't think I should clarify the fact that human beings are not objects. But maybe we need to. right? That it doesn't matter, right, all the reasons for why you think you're justified in doing it. If you are in this space of viewing pornography, you are saying to the human beings that you are watching, you are nothing more to me than my sexual slave, so thank you for supplying my needs. And we can try to glorify it all we want. That is what's happening. So for Christians, obviously we say no to it. For many of these reasons, but I want you to understand that as human beings, right, we need to be able to honor and not commoditize the beautiful gift of sexuality. Because I don't want to reduce a woman to simply a drug to me, my next hit, my next thing, right? And it's crazy because the main sort of consumers of pornography statistically are between 18 to 25-year-old men who are about to go get married. And this is dangerous because we know that porn literally changes the neural pathways of your mind, number one. It's highly addictive, number two. And it messes up your view of your wife. Women in the room, I want you to understand this. If you're dating some guy who is unable to control his porn issue, do not date him. Why? Because he's training himself to view you as his slave. And you don't want to marry that. I would tell my daughter, if she came up to me and said, Dad, here's what my boyfriend's doing, I'd say run for your life. Because hear me today, I can admit it, when I watched stuff when I was 15, I can still see those images just as clear today, 13 years later, as that first day. And I wish I'd never done it. Right? It's not just a one-time little thing. And hear me today, and wives, right, like guys, hear me today, like they don't compete with the computer. Because your wife will say no. The website won't. It actually says more. Right? Your wife won't be in the mood sometimes. Your wife's not going to compete with the hours of production, hair and makeup and working out that those actresses have to go through to get there. And also the fact that they're exploited and abused to be there. Right? Your wife can't compete with that. And women, why would you want to marry a guy who's going to get all sucky and angry when you don't act like the woman he's been ogling for the last 15 years of his life? You don't want to marry that. And men, if you are watching it, listen to me today. You are abusing the beautiful creations called women that God has made. And it's not okay. It's not just a one-time thing. It's not just, well, no, it's not that bad. Listen to me. I don't care what culture says. What we understand about human beings is they are so much more than that. And girls, run from these guys. Because they're building in their minds this harem of lust that you will never be able to satisfy. And they do not deserve your sexuality. Gentlemen, get a hold of it. Get a hold of it. It's not cute. It's not just a guy thing. It's abuse that we sell as entertainment. And connected to that, obviously, is this idea of masturbation, because there's a way that we have to sort of release the urges of that moment, right? But here's the thing. Even if you could go to me today, as some young men have, and says, I don't need to watch porn to masturbate. I just want to feel good. Hear me today. If already the established context of sexuality is unity within marriage, then you can't do that by yourself. Drop the mic. Right? Like to me, that is the thing. Right? So if you view sexuality simply as some pleasure-based thing, then yeah, fine, masturbation makes a lot of sense. But if you take Jesus' example and say, actually, it's beautiful, it's greater, it's a gift of God to strengthen, to love, to understand, to be selfless, directed at my spouse forever, then I can't, whether I'm married or not, masturbate in good faith, because I'm just taking advantage and perverting what God made. And so hear me today. I've heard it all. I've heard guys tell me that they can worship and do it at the same time. That's a whole other spiritual problem you got, right? I'm just putting it out there, right? I don't care. It was at camp one time. Some young guy was trying to be all sassy. He probably needs a counselor. But it doesn't really matter what you say. I've heard it all, right? That it's good for you. You got natural urges. You got to listen to me today. No one, I'll say it like this. People have died from the natural need to eat food and not have it, right? People have died from the natural need for water and not getting it. No one's died from not masturbating, okay? So I think you're going to be okay if you wait. I'm just putting it out there, right? Like all the dumb things you hear, can we just call it what it is, right? And so for us, we honor sexuality as the place, the beautiful place within marriage to remind each other, I'm yours forever. If that can't be upheld, then what you're doing probably isn't honoring to God. Mateo, I love that you're really into this right now. That's awesome. That's so awesome. Right? And then connected to this question was one about relationships. And it says this. How did I write it? I changed it slightly. How do we glorify God with the physical intimacy in a dating relationship? And the things that were asked on top of this was this, is it okay to talk about thoughts and fantasies about sex in a long-term relationship that isn't yet marriage, and should the intimacy ever move beyond kissing? Which I know for some of us in the room today, you might be thinking, what, move beyond kissing? What are you going to be, like, holding hands at the altar? I don't know if that's what it takes, maybe, whatever, right? Here's the thing. First off, this. The fact that you want to glorify God in your relationship, number one, is awesome. Awesome. Right? Because as a Christian, right, if we are someone who's an apprentice of Jesus following after him, the goal of my heart, and hear me today, this is where it gets key, is actually the health of my soul begins in my worship of God. That if I can align myself rightly with him to honor him in all that I am, I'm actually going to get more healthy. And so to want to glorify God in this way is to want my soul to be healthy. So that's awesome, and that is good, and it's going to be flourishing just from that point. Now, when it comes to dating in this, we have to just have a conversation, because I think there's something that doesn't get said often in the Christian circles, but it's so true. And there's this inherent tension in dating. And what I mean by that is this. Like on the one hand, dating is sort of like playing with fire, because as though you want to honor Jesus and walk with Jesus and be a good Christian and understand that, right? Like the natural progression of a growing intimacy is going to be some physical expression of that, right? That's part of the whole process. And so if you were dating someone for a while and there was like zero temptation and zero struggle, I'd say that's probably a problem, right? Like if you're not attracted to the person, you might want to break up and release them to go find someone else, right? Like there's going to be naturally a tension in there. And so the goal of like not struggling at all is ridiculous, because hopefully you are attracted to the person that you are with. It's how do we deal with that tension well? And really what it comes down to, I think, is communication, boundaries, and expectation. That we are having honest conversations around this, that we are truly in alignment on our views on sexuality. Because if you are someone who believes that sex is best served for marriage in that context, but they don't, it's going to be an awkward relationship. Right? And most likely you will fall. They won't. Right? So we need to have a good conversation around this. And so really, how do we honor this tension? Well, number one, I think we have to understand that too much too fast is always a bad thing. Always a bad thing. And most of us, I don't care if you're young or old, we fall into this in two ways. Because when you're younger, right, you start dating, it's exciting, and you kiss people, and guys, you remember your first kiss, it's so exhilarating, you want to do it all the time, right? Like, you want more, and you get in there, and then you get, and because you're like young and stupid, you just keep going, it's dumb, right? But even when you're older, because older people think that they're smarter, and sometimes you are, but then, no, you often use language. I don't care if you're 25, 35, or 50. I've heard this before. I'm wise enough to do what I want with my own body. I don't care if you're 50. If you follow Jesus, right, he determines what you do with your body. Right? It doesn't matter your age. It matters the state of your heart. Because I don't know if you realize this as a Christian, and maybe you should have thought about this before you committed to it, but when you become a Christian, you give up all rights to your own body. I don't get to do what I want with this instrument that exists in the world. It is to serve the glory of God, to follow him. That I'm going to believe that what he says is true, that the best life comes in following him, which means even with my body. So you are not some hyper-autonomous being. You are someone submitted to Jesus. Because he says my way is better. And so we have to live in this space of even, no matter how old you think you are, how long in your relationship, I don't care if you've been dating for 10 years, right? Which brings to mind other questions about your heart. But right? It doesn't really matter how old you are. The issue is, what is the state of your heart? And so people begin asking then, well, where is the line? You know, what is sin? And that's the wrong question. Why? Because the line was probably a lot further back than you think it is. Can we be real? Right? We often think that we are way more self-controlled than we actually are. So often. I remember being there. I remember being in the space, and like, I like my wife, right? And I remember having to set up some rules at the beginning. We talked about this right at the beginning of a relationship that were like more strict than probably I needed to, simply because, well, I knew myself, right? And I wanted to make sure that I'm not going to do anything dumb, right? And because I think she's hot. So, let's put that one out there, right? As a married person, I'm allowed to say that because she is. Anyways, right? And so the question is for you is what are those boundaries that you are putting up? Like I'm just saying, nothing really good ever happens after about 10:30 when you're alone together. I'm not going to tell you have to do that. I'm just saying, I've never heard good things. Oh, we were just cuddling and we fell asleep and then somehow my clothes fell off. Right? That could have been avoided. Right? That actually could have been avoided. Right? So putting some boundaries in place that help with that, but realizing at the heart of it is you're not just protecting yourself from physical boundaries, but also your head and your heart. This is what we don't understand. Purity is not just not having sex. Right? It's where's my mind at? Towards my spouse or towards my partner. Right? Because even after you're married, by the way, purity doesn't shift, right? It's still a state of my heart desiring the best and to be pure before my spouse and to think of her in the best way I can and to honor her in all things, right? And so for us, it's not just what are my physical limits, it's also where are my mental ones. So that's the thing. If you are someone in a relationship and you know right now that the state that you're in, maybe you're in a weird space emotionally and you're full of hormones and you know if you lay down and cuddle that you're going to have some bad thoughts, don't lay down and cuddle. Like, some of your friends may be able to. I don't know. I would probably bet not. But hey, right? Like I remember telling some kid that if you can't hold your girlfriend's hand, right, without getting all wild up, then don't hold her hand, right? You're trying to protect yourself from that, right? And if you're like, well, then I need to develop some self-control. Maybe you do. You need to work on your soul and cultivate yourself for the things of Jesus. The point is simply, hear me today, and this is key, not to say no right now, but to say yes to better later. That's what we're after. God wants you to have the best sex life possible. Can we be real? Well, you may not have heard that in church before. Let me be the first one to tell you. God wants you to have good sex, okay? He wants you to have awesome sex with your spouse, right? So you're protecting that now. Honor that now. Pursue that now. Because even statistically, by the way, it's better when you're married. So why would you want to experiment before? It's true. You can look it up, right? So protect it. Now, the question didn't have to do with my thoughts. Can I share my thoughts around sexuality? Here's the thing. This is going to be weird. If you're having fantasies about your person, right, and you start sharing about that, I'm going to wager it's not going to set you up to be holy and worship Jesus, right? It's probably going to put some things and get some hormones going and get you in a place where it's like, I want to know how that would go, right? So probably I would not talk about those things. But we have to have an honest conversation here about the layers of our intimacy, because here's the thing, the closer you get to marriage, the more you do have to talk about sex. Because one of the worst things you can do, hear me young Christians, is go into sex and have different expectations of what it is. Because if you go in as a young man thinking, I'm going to get sex 3 times a week, and she's like, once a month is great, right? That's going to cause a problem, right? That's going to be an issue. Right? And if you've been trained maybe in the church that you grew up that sex is dirty and gross and don't want it, I've heard stories of people not able to actually have sex on their wedding night because they have to also turn on this thing that is great. And that's a problem, right? That we believe as Christians that sex is glorious and it's good and it's wonderful. But if they've been raised to believe the opposite of that, they just can't put that all away on the one night that they get married. Right? So we need to begin to have these conversations on healthy sexuality before we do get married. As we're moving towards that, once the conversation on marriage is beginning to happen. If you're not talking about marriage, then you should not be talking about sex anyway. Because if you are not ready to commit my life to them, then I'm not ready for their body. And I want to say this quickly because this is a weird part of our culture. Right? If you're not married, you do not owe your body to anybody. Right? We have this weird thing that's like if you go on 3 dates and all of a sudden it's time for sex, you do not owe anybody your body, women. Right? If he's like, hey, it's time, it's been 6 months, you say, well, it's time to leave now because you're an idiot, and let him walk away, because that's not what this is about. Right? You have to honor what you have. Right? This is a gift of God for the benefit of my spouse. And if you're not my spouse, I'm not going to give you nothing. Right? And then, by the way, in marriage, it says that we have the rights to each other to honor, love, and serve. And so when you're married, then we can have that conversation. And so, no. Don't be sharing all your stuff about the fantasies you have. Maybe with an accountability partner, but not your girlfriend, right? And then number 2 is this. As you approach marriage, I want to make sure this is clear for us, that in the context probably, hopefully, if not in premarital counseling with a very trusted couple, you do need to begin to talk about your sexual history together. Understand the wounds and the issues that you've gone through to give context for what you're about to enter into. Because this is a deep place of pain that oftentimes Christians don't talk about for whatever dumb reason because we privatize it so much. Because there are a lot of issues that come up in our sexual life that begin to affect our marriages and bring tension, but we never talk about it, we never know about it. How am I going to deal with that? I've heard stories of women who have been abused but don't say anything about it, get to be married, come to their wedding night, and their husband triggers them. Right? That's a weird, awkward situation for everybody. right? But if we're not talking about it and working on through that, then that's what's going to happen maybe, potentially. Hopefully not for you. But making sure that in the context of proper spaces of heading towards marriage that we are doing our due diligence to talk about these things. Because I don't know about you, but sexuality is a big part of human life, right? Like we can't just ignore that, right? But we have to do it well. And I want to make sure that you get set up for the best sex you can have in your marriage. And that has to do with honesty and openness. And is it awkward? Of course it's awkward. Especially if you've had sex with other people. Now I got to tell my spouse I have sex with all these other people. And by the way, no one wants to know that I have to compare myself to other people now. All right? It's just part of the game, though. So why would I give my spouse, and this is motivation to actually be pure, is why would I want to give my spouse that extra layers of insecurity that she already has? Purity for us is the state of heart. So how's your heart? Now to end on a really good question, because it is 11:30 and I could talk for a long time, and if you guys want me to keep going, I'm just kidding. Everyone's so quiet now. That was a big one. I understand that. And for some of you, that probably was confrontational a little bit because you like sex. Can we be real? Right? But I want to love Jesus more. Last question about parenting. Put it up there. Actually, Ben, you guys can come up. It's up there. I don't know why I was staring there for so long. I was waiting for change, but you already changed it. Is it hot in here? I'm feeling a little bit hot. No. That's just some on-the-fly, audible conversation happening. I'm allowed to go long sometimes. I know it's been basically every week for the last 6, but hey, I'm going to get better. I'm promising you that. The last question is this, right? How do we get some God time in our devos and all that stuff? Here's I want to give you some really simple advice, right? Is the best way to talk about Jesus with your children is to be in a relationship with your kids. Simply put, right? Find the space that's in your family rhythm and just infuse it with life. For us and our family, but the best space that we have is at dinner time and at bedtime. So if you ever booked a meeting with me, usually it's about 7:30, 7:45, because that's after my kids go to bed. And we reserve that space to read the Bible with them, to pray with our kids. Even now, Weston, you can't understand me. We still pray for his future, for his giftings, for his callings, for what he's about, because we want to make sure that's a space that's sacred for our children. And now that Liv is 3, she asks for it. Right? When we don't read the Bible, right, she'll say, did we read the Bible today? And we'll have to go get the Bible and read it. In fact, I even ask her now at dinner, hey, did you read the Bible? Because she starts reading other books, and although she reads it, but she can know the pictures. And so I'll ask her, hey, were you in the Word today? And she'll say, no, I wasn't. And then we'll go get her Bible and we'll look at it, right? Not that I'm trying to make her feel guilty, but I'm trying to help her understand this, right? Or a really cool one is this that I sort of felt weird about it as a dad, but I'm cool with it now, is we let her pray over dinner. Right? Because sometimes I feel like I got to be the dad and pray over dinner. But we've trained her and given her a simple prayer to pray just to allow her to talk to Jesus. Right? Thank you for this food. Thank you for our family. And then I've gotten her to pray that your kingdom come and your will be done in our hearts and in our home. Amen. And actually let her pray to the point now that she thinks that it's her job to pray. Right? Sometimes it's annoying because I want to pray, but then she always takes it on me. Right? But the point is in the space of my family, finding time just to invest in them. Right? And just to take the moments. If for you it's in the morning at breakfast, then do it in the morning at breakfast. That's fine. I'm not going to tell you when or how, but making sure that we are entering into a relationship with our children and saying, here is who Jesus is. Right? The best thing you can be as a parent for your kids in a relationship is just to be an actual Christian following Jesus. Right? Invite them into that. Invite them into that. So this is the conclusion of our Cultivate series today. And I hope you learned some stuff. I'm excited for our next series. I don't think we're starting it next week, but it's going to be a good one. I promise you that. It's going to be awesome. But this one has been centered around this very simple thought, that the condition of your soul leaks. Can you think today, how is your soul? Because I know there's people in the room today that you need to repent of your porn stuff. That today needs to be a day of change. That you need to stop participating in the abuse of women. For some of you in the room today, today's a day where we need to just get real with our heart that I'm carrying some anxiety and some issues that bring to my marriage. Some of us, we just need to be reminded again today that I have allowed some insecurity things to affect my singleness. How is your soul? That is the question. Because Jesus says that you will live from the condition of your soul. But he also said that there's one place to get healed. One place. It's in him. He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. That outside of him, that we are lost in perpetual brokenness that separates us from the Father, the source of life itself. That if we would come and trust Jesus, he is going to give us life right now, life forever, freedom from sin and shame, guilt and death, and actually heal some of the wounds that you've been trying to in your own strength but can't. This is the beautiful thing about Jesus. Can I just take a moment right where religion says that you gotta fix it all and figure it out and put it together, and spirituality, if you do enough things and you spend enough time in this practice, then maybe good things might come from the universe. Simply today, Jesus says, you can't do it, so I'm going to do it. You can't fix it, so I'm going to be your healer. You can't make it right, so I'm going to do all that you need to do to get you to the place of your healing. If you would come to Jesus and follow him, life is given forever. Cultivating health in your soul is not some gimmick, not read some spiritual book, go on some pilgrimage. It's coming to Jesus. That is it. Try your best, every other religion. Go ahead. I challenge you. You will not find life like you will in Jesus. This is our call as Christians. That God came to earth, died on the cross, broke death itself, and says, if you would follow me, if you would walk with me, I will make you well again. I will make you whole.